7 o'clock on Wednesday, April the 12th, and I would like to call to order the Ottawa City Planning Commission regular meeting. Would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Member Kane?
Here.
Member Crowley?
Here.
Member Elmer?
Here.
Member Streznik Dean?
Here.
Member Maines? Vice Chair Wanika?
Yep.
Chair Lantis?
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. At this time, I'd ask for public comments on things that are not on the agenda tonight. Persons who wish to address the City Planning Commission regarding items on the agenda may do so when that item is called. Persons who wish to address the Planning Commission regarding items not on the agenda and that are under the jurisdiction of the City Planning Commission may do so at this time when called on by the chair. Comments on personnel matters and matters pending in court or with other outside tribunals are not permitted. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Any public comments entered via online chat will not be recognized or commented upon. Any presentation is for information purposes only. The Planning Commission will take comments under advisement. So at this time, is there anybody here that wishes to comment anything that's not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, at this time I would like to ask the Planning Commission members to make a declaration of any conflict of interest or of any ex parte or outside communication that might influence their ability to hear all sides on any item on the agenda so that they might come to a fair decision. Seeing none, I'd like to deviate from the printed agenda for a few minutes and ask our new city manager, Mr. Brian Silcott, to come up and give us a couple of words this evening.
Planning Commissioners, I just wanted to introduce myself formally. I believe I've met most of you at the various functions leading up to the hiring, as well as at retiring manager Richard Neinstedt's retirement reception. So I just wanted to say thank you for serving your community. I know you do so without compensation, and you give freely of your time. And I look forward to working with you and the wonderful community development staff that is also serving our community. So thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to serving you.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Welcome.
All right, first on the agenda is the consent agenda, and so we'll consider the minutes of the March 30th, 2023 study session minutes for approval. Is there a motion for approval?
I motion. I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Public hearings. The first public hearing on the agenda tonight is, before we do that, so for public hearings tonight, we're only here to speak about the issue that is on the agenda, not about future uses or anything like that, number one. Number two, we won't have dialogue between the staff or the applicant or the public. This is not a conversation. This is for you. If you have concerns, this is for you all to come in and express your concerns. Once the public hearing is closed, then we'll take those concerns under advisement as we go through the process to make our decision. So if I say we're not going to discuss that right now, we'll discuss it after. I promise you, I'm not trying to be rude. That's the way this process is supposed to work, and so that's the way we're going to have it work. And the one other thing I want to do, I understand last month, several of you showed up for a public hearing, and that public hearing had been canceled, and you weren't notified. I have no excuse for that other than we had a city staff in transition. It got lost in the cracks that we didn't notify the people we'd sent letters to. That's probably as much my fault as it is theirs, because I've been doing this for a long time, and I forgot to ask them, did we notify the people that we sent letters to? So again, all I can do at this point is apologize to you for that misunderstanding. So having said that, we'll move on to public hearings. The first public hearing is a request for a partial utility easement at 929 and 931 East Wilson. Jenna, would you I guess I need to open the public hearing, and Jenna, would you like to give your report?
Okay, so our first item is partial vacation of an easement at 929 and 931 East Wilson. This is a request by Slade Vandeventer. Here we go. Am I not on? Okay. I have a soft voice. There we go. Okay. So this partial vacation of an easement utility. So what he's requesting is that we vacate 2.5 feet of a utility easement. There was a structure that was built. Okay, there was a structure that was built over this easement. And we have spoken with Public Works and all the various entities, and the 2.5 feet of this easement, if we were to vacate it for them, would not interfere with the access to utilities. So this is where it is located. This is this is from 2016, this aerial view. There's a site plan there of where this duplex was built, and the yellow line there is where the easement currently is. The 2.5 feet would clear him of that, and that's all that we are asking. This will not impact the public or endanger any of the private rights, and legal notice was given to all the surrounding properties with a good amount of time for them to be able to respond. And
that
so our staff recommendation is that you consider approval for this partial vacation of this easement.
Is the applicant here tonight?
I have not seen Slade tonight, no.
Is there anybody here tonight that wishes to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, comments, questions?
Sounds pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, as long as the utility director's given it his blessings, I think we should all be good to go. So, hearing no more conversation, back here for a second. Is there a motion to approve the findings or accept the findings as our own?
Move.
Is there a second?
Yep, second.
Okay, would you call the roll?
Member Straisnick Dean,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wanika,
Yes.
Member Elmer,
Yes.
Member Maines, Member Crowley,
Yes.
Chair Lantis,
Yes.
Member Kane.
Yes.
Okay, so the second part, we'll need a motion to, now, are we approving this, or are we recommending to the city that they approve this?
To the city, correct.
We'll recommend, so we'll need a motion to recommend to the city that they approve our findings on the partial utility easement at 929 and 931 East Wilson.
I so move.
Second?
Motion and a second, would you call the roll?
Member Straisnick Dean,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wanika,
Yes.
Member Elmer,
Yes.
Member Maines, Member Crowley,
Yes.
Chair Lantis.
Yes,
Member Kane.
Yes.
and that was Member Wanika that's made the motion, and Member Kane has seconded it. I
Thank you.
saw you look real quick.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, item number 3, request a rezone of 901 South Cherry Street from R1 HOO. That's, it has just escaped me. High HOO.
Is that just escaped me too. I had it until you said that. It is Housing Opportunity Overlay.
Housing Opportunity Overlay, I'm sorry about that. Low-density residential Housing Opportunity Overlay District to R3 High-Density Residential District at 901 South Cherry Street. And I'm going to open the public hearing on that and ask Jenna Hilliard to make her staff presentation. I do want to say, I guess I forgot to say it on the last one, we do have on Zoom, excuse me, we do have on Zoom Blaine Finch, our city attorney. So if there's any questions that come up on any legalese or anything, we'll refer to him on that. So, but he is on Zoom. I think he's on Zoom, correct? He is here. Okay. So we're going to open the public hearing. Jenna, would you like to make your presentation, please?
Yes, sir. This is for a rezone for 901 South Cherry. The applicant is Raymond Love. This is a 5.7 acre tract at the intersection of South Cherry and 9th Street. The site is currently undeveloped land. The applicant intends to repurpose the site into a mix of student housing and multifamily apartments. The room mix has not been finalized, but at this time, the applicant is anticipating accommodations for 30 to 50 students, some of which will be apartments available to non-students. There will be adequate off-street parking as set forth by regulations, which require 1 off-street parking space for each sleeping room for dormitories and 2 off-street parking spaces for multifamily unit dwellings. Within the current zoning, within current zoning regulations, this is currently zoned low-density residential with the housing opportunity overlay. And what that overlay means is that it allows for a denser development. They don't have to have the same sized lots or the same setbacks for the homes that are placed in it. So it allows for a higher density than either R1 or R2 typically would. So this is already zoned at a higher density than the surrounding neighborhood. But at this current density, or this current zoning rather, it does not allow for student housing as a conditional use or as a use that's given by right for this area. So what I have here for you is the zoning map. The lighter blue is the low-density residential. The slightly darker blue is the medium-density residential, which allows for duplexes and triplexes as well as single-family homes. The 2 pink that we have are manufactured home park district and also manufactured, they're both manufactured homes. And then we also have some public use. As you can see, that light green there in the left is where the college currently is. So the 2 things that that I looked at rezoning for were R2 residential district, which we discussed is to provide 1, 2, or 3 family dwellings with some accommodations for 4+ family dwellings as conditional uses, and related residential uses and certain public uses. This district allows for moderate density for these types of dwelling units. Dormitories, residence halls for students attending universities, and 4+ family units are permitted as conditional use. With 3, the intent for R3 district is to provide a full range of dwelling units from 1-family apartments and for related residential and certain public uses and related residential uses and certain public uses. The district is located primarily within moderate to high residential density, will be compatible with surrounding uses and development patterns. Multifamily dwellings and dormitory residence halls are permitted by right to provide that intensity of use and standards are met, and the dormitories provide beds for 30 students maximum. So they would only be allowed to, it's permitted to allow for student housing so long as it doesn't exceed 30 in R3. In R2, it is a conditional use, the student housing would be. There was a request, these are the conditional and permitted uses in residential zoning. So in that first column, we have low density, and then R2. So the C is conditional and the P is permitted, which means it's just automatically allowed. They would need to seek further approval. And as we covered, dormitories and residence halls for students, universities are conditional in R2 and are permitted with conditions in R3. This is just a proposal for the layout that he was considering in that area. But as we were just talking about zoning tonight, this is just an example of something that could possibly happen here. And on to our staff findings. The first thing that we looked at, aside from the potential zoning that could happen in this area, we have 13 other conditions that we look at. The first is whether the change in classification would be consistent with the intent and purpose of these regulations. I did find that it is consistent as a residential in either R2 or R3. However, R3 high-density residential is inconsistent with the zoning of the surrounding area because most of it is low density to medium density. So the R3 would be an intenser use of this tract of land than the ones surrounding it. Number 2, the character and condition of surrounding neighborhood and its effect on proposed change. Staff finding is that this large tract of land that has never been developed until recently, the tract was part of floodplain and unable to be developed as it was intended to be. At its current zoning, the tract of land could be developed into a minimum of 30 single-family homes. In recent years, work has been done to elevate this portion of the block out of the floodplain and is now capable of development. Having been a long-standing green space, developing it in any form will change the current character of the neighborhood. But otherwise, the intent of its zoning would not change. Number 3, whether the proposed amendment is necessary because of change or changing conditions in the affected area, and if so, the nature of such changed or changing conditions. Staff finding is, the proposed amendment is made necessary due to changing conditions in the city and the demand for additional multifamily housing as well as student housing in Ottawa. The current zoning of this tract of low-density residential with housing opportunity overlay allows for more concentration than R1 and R2 standards, but in this zoning, student housing is not permitted. The need for it and proximity to this location to the university makes it an ideal location for the student housing project. R2 and R3 zoning would permit development as student housing. 4, the current zoning and use of nearby properties and the effect on its existing land uses upon such change in classification. The rezone to R3 will not change the overall residential land uses. It will change the intensity of use in the neighborhood is accustomed to. It's very text heavy, and I apologize for that.
That's fine.
Just don't want to make sure I missed anything. Number 5, whether every use that would be permitted on the property as reclassified would be compatible with the uses permitted on other property in the immediate vicinity. Our staff finding is there are no R3 zoning in this vicinity, though there are 2 large apartment complexes zoned R2 nearby, 701 South Poplar and 745 South Hickory, indicating that there is a precedent for R2 designation with conditional use permits allowing the project to move forward without drastically changing the zoning. 6, the suitability of the applicant's property for the uses which has been restricted. Staff finding the amount of buildable space at this location is more than adequate for the developer's proposal for both housing and for off-street parking. The location of this lot makes it a desirable site for the use of student housing. 7, the length of time the subject property has remained vacant or undeveloped as zoned. This tract has never been developed due to floodplain. Whether adequate sewer and water facilities and other public services exist or can be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the property as classified. The city and processes for installation of improvements will ensure that the facilities serve the development are adequate. And there are currently places to be able to hook up to utilities in this area. The general amount of vacant land that has the same zoning classification proposed for the subject property, particularly in the vicinity of the subject property and special circumstances that make a substantial part of such vacant land available or not available development. There are no properties available for this type of use in the nearby vicinity, and the location of this lot is one of the reasons the applicant wishes to develop it in this manner. The subject site's location and surrounding mix of residential uses and underuse of this tract of land does help make the argument that this rezoning may be appropriate at this time. Whether the proposed amendment would be in conformance to further enhance the implementation of the city's comprehensive plan. The future land use plan in the comprehensive plan identifies this property as low-density residential. The proposal is not in conformance with the future land map. However, it does meet Goal 4 in the comprehensive plan of promoting housing quality and diversity. The City of Ottawa is growing in ways that were unforeseen when the comprehensive plan was drafted. There is a larger need for housing than anticipated. If the need for student housing were to be addressed, the spaces that students are currently renting could become available to the public, shifting the current use of housing stock. The zoning and surrounding land use is arguably fitting with this underdeveloped neighborhood and meets the comprehensive plan's stated goal to improve availability of multifamily and rental properties in the city. 11, whether the related gain to the public health, safety, and general welfare outweighs the hardship imposed upon the applicant by not upgrading the value of the property by such reclassification. The findings above illustrate that the proposed location is suitable for a higher density residential zone. Staff finds that the rezoning could be a gain to general welfare of the public and would promote growth in the area that has been undeveloped land. Aside from adding more housing to the city, the development of this land would ensure that it is maintained and not returned to the overgrown state. Overgrown lots have a history of becoming littered or used as dump sites, and in some cases can become contributing factors in increasing crime in the area. Moved on without moving on. Such other factors as the Planning Commission may deem relevant from the facts and evidence presented in the application. Higher density zoning for this tract and the proposed development would benefit the city. However, staff has concerns about spot zoning and believes that zoning R2 would be adequate to allow this development with a conditional use permit specifically for student housing. R3 is an excessive and unnecessary upzone when R2 would allow the same uses with conditional permits and help maintain the fabric of the neighborhood in the future. As a housing opportunity overlay district, it allows for denser development than traditional R1 or R2. The HOO requires a minimum of 40-foot frontage and 90 feet depth for per lot. With this size of lot and tract of land, potentially could be developed into more than 30 single-family homes, which is comparable to the applicant's proposal of 40 to 50 beds for dormitories. This change in zoning would not dramatically alter the intention of this neighborhood or the intent of its current zoning. Dormitories require stricter off-street parking regulations of one off-street parking space per bed, whereas single-family parking standards require only 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling. These spaces generally consist of a garage space and a single space in the driveway. This often leads to increased on-street parking situations for single-family dwellings for various reasons. Dormitories would directly address the parking issue by requiring 1 off-street parking space per bed in a living situation in which not all residents will own a vehicle. And so my recommendation, or staff's recommendation, is that 901 South Cherry not be approved to rezone as R3 high-density residential. Staff recommends commission approve the rezone to R2 medium-density residential, and retain the housing opportunity overlay for future development if the project envisioned does not proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Anybody have any? Yes.
before you start, I was not part of the study session. I have not engaged in any ex parte communication, nor do I know the applicant. But given that it involves student housing and the university, I think I'm ethically obliged to recuse myself from this next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And since we're not, well, we will be taking a vote, you might want to sit in the audience while we're doing this. Thank you. Okay, so the staff's recommendation is that that it not be R3, that it be R2 with an overlay.
Correct.
Okay. Next, we'd like to hear from the applicant and come up and state your name and your address, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Raymond Love. Address is 1663 Riley Road, Pomona, Kansas. When we purchased this property, we had all intentions of development. We had been speaking with the university. We have a letter of support for student housing, as many of us know. Many of the students that are attending the university currently are not able to reside on location. So they are being housed in old hotels or other apartments throughout the city and having to commute to the location. This location is in a close proximity to the university, obviously. With their letter of support that we have gotten, this is the early stages. We wanted to not get the cart too far out in front of the horse before we spent a lot of time and money with the university to develop a plan and a course of action for their housing needs on what that may look like. In our early discussions, we talked about, are we looking at more of a universal 1 unit where they all kind of have the shared restaurant, housing, and restroom situations. The other are we looking at 2-bedroom units that would then be 2 per unit with a shared kitchen? So instead of going into real detail on what it is that we would be doing, we wanted to see that, make sure we had the approval from the city for the rezone before we actually sat down with them, worked on a diagram with the architects, and fulfilled the needs that the university would have.
Okay, thank you.
Anything
Anything
else?
else? Any questions for him right now, or do you want to wait till we have our discussion? Okay, thank you, Mr. Love. Okay, we're going to open the public comment section. I do have two, before anybody stands up, I do have two emails. One from Todd Brown, 922 and 926 South Sycamore, and one from Deborah Brown, and it says 900 block of South Sycamore, so possibly could be related, but I think everybody has a copy of those. And I'd like to just ask them to be put in the record along with any public comments that we have tonight.
Absolutely.
Okay. And if anybody would like to see a copy of those. Now, come to the microphone and state your name and your address. And remember, we're here tonight to talk about zoning, even though we've seen a sketch with possibly a building on it. That will come back to us should we rezone at some point in the future. We will have either a site plan or a conditional use application come back, and we'll go through all of this again in more detail with traffic studies and with stormwater runoff studies, all of the things necessary for us then to approve something to go on this. Tonight, we're just talking about, should we change the zoning, and if so, what should we change it to? So with that, please.
I'm Deidre Altic. I live at 716 East 10th. We've lived there for 20 years, and I wanted to address you and oppose this rezoning in our neighborhood for many reasons, and I ask you to consider them carefully. My first reason is safety. Our streets around this area in our neighborhood, we have brick streets that are already in poor shape. 9th Street from Mulberry to Lincoln is brick. Mulberry Street from 11th North is brick. 10th Street from Mulberry to Sycamore is brick. 10th Street from Cherry to Lincoln is chip and seal. And an apartment complex could add 30 to 50 to 100 cars daily on those streets, and they'll deteriorate even more quickly than they already are. Sidewalks, the only sidewalks we have in our neighborhood is on Mulberry and then on 9th Street on the north side. Those are the only sidewalks in the whole area. We have lots of children in our neighborhood who walk to school, who walk to friends' houses, who ride their bikes, and with that many more cars on the streets, it's a safety risk for our children. And then Burrow Street and 10th Street is an uncontrolled intersection and could pose a traffic risk. My next reason is the wastewater. Half of the area to be rezoned is in the floodplain, as well as up to 10th and Cherry. It floods, and I know because I've lived there for 20 years, it floods every year, up 10th Street to Burrow. If you have to have parking there, that parking lot is going to add to the wastewater, and then where is that water going to go? It already can't handle it down at that facility down at the end of 10th Street. And then water also backs up on the corner of 10th and Cherry. We live in a neighborhood. I can name more than 5 people, probably 10, that have lived there in our neighborhood for 20 years or more. Lots of other families have lived there 10 years, 15 years. An apartment complex is not conducive to our neighborhood, and as you said, the nearest apartment complexes are blocks away. I understand that Ottawa University needs more housing for their students, but I think they should be responsible for building it. They have a large lot on 11th and Cedar. They have a large lot on 11th and Mulberry where they could build dorms right there in walking distance. And so in conclusion, I'd please take into consideration your constituents that live in our neighborhood. We did not move to a neighborhood that had an apartment complex, and we don't want the increased traffic and the water runoff that it'll bring. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, my name is Judy Wilson, and I live at 724 East 10th, so just catty corner to this property. And Deidre expressed that about the flooding because I was concerned. It said it's in no floodplain, that it does flood, so I'm going to just back that up. Okay, one of the things that they were talking about, and I support our university, and I've had family that went to that university. So I support that. But they do have their own ground on 11th and Mulberry, right there, that they can build on. And the kids can just walk to school. There won't be any driving. You know, they're not going to drive their car across the street. And they're talking about 50 units or whatever. So 50 kids, everybody having a car. Okay, but I won't go there. I'll try not to go there. The thing that they did comment on was that there are students that can't find housing, and they're taking up some housing. Well, if they repaired their apartment over there on their own property, the students that live across the street from me, that are in and out, could go there, and it would free up apartments and houses in Ottawa for other people. So I'm opposed to this rezoning. I don't want it rezoned at all. I think it's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kelly Hostler. I live right across the street at 926 South Cherry. And I reiterate what they said. We just moved here a year and a half ago. Thought it was a great neighborhood. It's quiet. It's peaceful. And I'm opposed. I believe that Ottawa University, they have the space, that they can do it. What is wanting to be built isn't strictly for Ottawa University. It even says that it's not. It's for the students and public housing. I am thoroughly opposed to do this. I think there's better uses to do with that land. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sheila Lewis Cunningham. I'm at 835 East 9th Street. Been there 18 years, going on 19. Again, I back what they say, the flooding. I can actually watch when it downpours and rains. I can sit in my window and watch 10th and Borough flood. And they actually come and start watching that intersection and block it off with barricades when it does flood. And so I heard a statement, and I was reading that they brought in dirt to rectify and bring that area up and take it out of flooding. The area is still flood. I was surprised where they're talking about the intersection, I want to say a few years ago, and it just downpoured. I was driving down 9th, and I looked down, and you could not even drive down there. There was a car actually in the water. And so, you know, I don't think it's rectified for where the water's going to go. We even have water coming down the stream behind our house that fills up so rapidly to go under 9th Street, down through that area that's on the right side when you were looking at that map. Also, I did attend Ottawa University, and the lot that they're talking about, there was a Centennial Hall that was in that area. At that time, when I was leaving out and graduating, they were tearing down that dorm. They said it was going to be rebuilt. And so that's been empty. I've been gone since, I want to say, ooh, Lord, dating, gosh.
A long time.
A
You
long
can just say
time.
a long time.
Yes. So that was what was told to us at that time. They were going to rebuild a dorm because Centennial was not livable and up to date. So I was just wondering what's going on with that when they're saying they need more housing for students and this will help.
Darrell Kraus, 930 South Cherry. The southern part of that property is much lower than the northern part of that property. They'd have to raise the southern part of that property at least 8 feet, and probably more like 10 to 12 feet, in order to make that project work. That's 240,000 cubic feet that would be displaced, the water would be displaced, where would it go? Right on my street, Cherry Street. It already floods over and comes onto Cherry Street. Now you're wanting to put 240,000 cubic feet of water in that same area. Thank you.
I'm opposed.
My name is Billy Cunningham. I live at 835 East 9th Street. I'm opposed to this because yesterday it rained. We got almost 2 inches. I'm sitting here watching television and I'm watching the water come down the street. This morning, the kids walking, they got to walk in the middle of the street to keep from getting wet to get to the bus stop. Okay, where's the water gonna go if they develop this land? I got 2 sump pumps. It started raining in 3 weeks, my sump pump is still going. What is going on with, they said we're not in the floodplain, we can't get flood insurance, but sump pump is still going, constantly. So we're in the floodplain according to me, because we gotta have 2 sump pumps, one on standby just in case one stop, and God forbid if the power goes out, the basement is flooded. We live right on the edge of something that's very, very unnatural, and they want to put apartment complex for the university. I'm all for college. I'm all for it. Find another place to put the buildings that it won't put everybody else that's been living there, kids play in the middle of the street. You put college kids there, it's going to be what? Traffic. I think people wait till it rain to run down 9th Street to see how far the water can go in somebody's yard. I have called the police. I have called to say, we need somebody to monitor this. Because they come down the road 50, 60 miles an hour, see how far to make the water go. We got kids. If it's not for me, safety. Safety of our kids, players in the middle of the streets, and we got cobblestone. They're not in the best shape. No, they're not. But we tolerate it because guess what? That's what we're accustomed to. That's what we look forward to, for people to be safe. You put that dorm up here, and guess what? Just saying I'm opposed to it.
Nikki Beauvais. I'm at 810 East 10th Street. My husband and I actually just moved several months ago. We've been there since October. We were living out in the country and specifically chose that area because it kind of had that country feel. It was quiet and just had a very relaxed feel. Obviously, if you guys decide to pass this, and it does become something that can be, what's the word? What am I thinking of? Developed, thank you. It's really gonna lose that feeling. So I am opposed. There was a lot of choices of houses that we can choose, and we specifically chose this one for that, that feel of not feeling like we're in a big industrial park. So, thank you.
No. I live on 825 South Princeton. Okay?
And what's your name?
Jackie Wilson. And once in a while, like, I'm walking around in Kansas, and some cars are going really, really fast and whatnot. And that's like a danger zone to some of these parents that have kids. And I'm like, I'm okay if you guys build somewhere, but why don't you build they can walk and not destroy any more road development that's already being destroyed as it is. That's
Okay,
it.
thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Janet Stratton. I live at 945 South Sycamore, right on the corner of 10th Street and Sycamore. I too have safety concerns, so I am opposed to the change in the zoning. It's been well stated that we have no sidewalks in the area. So the development will increase vehicle traffic and also foot traffic, which is dangerous without any sidewalks. And I'm also concerned, not just for rezoning, but for general principles about no stop sign at the corner of Burroughs and 10th Street. So that's just kind of an added safety thing for this whole area. And as been stated, there is a lot of children in our community that they love to play. And we constantly have to watch out for the children on the streets. Bicycles, playing basketball, etc. So increased traffic would limit their play area as well. And I'm also concerned about increased potential for rowdiness from parties, perhaps increased drugs, increased alcohol that would be exposed to our children. And I don't want that moving into my neighborhood. My husband and I have lived here 2 years, and we love our neighborhood, and we want to preserve it. As far as the flooding that has been mentioned, I honestly don't know about that, but I do know that my sump pump runs a lot, and we are higher than this proposed developed area. So, for what it's worth, I guess I'm concerned about that too. So I do oppose this rezoning until perhaps some more studies are done. And I too wonder about that vacant lot on the corner of 11th and Marlboro. It's beautiful, but I didn't know that it used to have a dormitory there, but that seems like a very good likely spot for them. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Last chance. With that, we'll close the public hearing and commission. Comments, questions, concerns?
Yeah, I have several comments. The first thing I want to say is, as far as the people not wanting to develop this ground, we can't stop someone from purchasing this ground and developing it as housing. So when the comments made that it's going to affect the flooding that goes on in that area, I understand what everyone's saying there because I've lived here for a long, long time and I know that ground floods also. But again, we can't stop someone from going in there and building 11, 12, 13, 14 houses, whatever it was approved for before. With this project, depending on how this goes, we would have some control. And let me back up. The housing that could be here could cause the same issues that this development could cause. Depending on how this goes, we could have some control in what the developer could do with the stormwater with some type of conditional use permit. I want you guys to understand that. If this is denied and the developer decides to build a bunch of houses in there, it could be worse for you. Again, because we could have some control in the stormwater. Couple other comments. The sidewalks, the issue you guys say there's not enough sidewalks there. We can't control the sidewalks. The developer can't control the sidewalks that are in the area that are adjacent to this property. But again, with the conditional use permit, we do have control on the sidewalks on this property, and that is something that would be addressed. So sidewalks, there's a good chance that sidewalks will be all the way around this property. Just depends on how it goes. The parking, the comments about the parking, the city staff commented in there, but I'm going to reiterate what the city staff said, that the parking also with this development, depending on how it goes, could be better than what it would be with the housing, because this would require off-street parking compared to houses that would be in the street. So the parking would be better if we have control. Yeah, that's my comments.
Okay.
I do see that there is definitely a need for housing, whether it is for the public or for students, and this is a piece of ground that's been empty for a long, long time. It's been for sale for a long, long time, and I personally think this could be a good project.
Okay. Someone else? Anyone?
I think there's a lot of potential with this project, but I do have concerns about just the water issue on the street that's there right now, and what the city would need to do on the city's end in order to make that work, particularly if you're looking at a lot of pavement. But I did want to ask, with the R3 versus the R2, you know, if this gets approved as R2, what, if this project didn't go through, what could be built?
The R2 allows for duplexes and triplexes in single-family homes.
Okay, so you're still talking about height restrictions,
Yes.
but, so it would, but R3 would let you be at a higher density?
Correct.
Okay. So if this fell through, it could still be developed as single-family homes, as duplexes? Okay.
Right, right.
Anyone else? Come on, you guys, I know you got some thoughts.
Well, I need to go back to staff findings.
Well, while you do that, I will say mine. As a contractor like Bill, I drive this town like crazy, and I have never been a big fan of chip and overlay or brick streets, and I do understand their concern for the increased traffic on those brick streets, and they're already rough as can be. So, Bill, I think with conditional use, there may be some things that we can do to address some of that. I don't know how far we can go with that, but so I do understand that concern. I mean, brick streets were great 100 years ago, but they're not great today. And they keep mentioning the intersection of 10th and Borough where it floods or where there's a lack of traffic control. I think that's an easy fix. But before we stop there, now that's beyond our scope here today, but all these things are, some of these things are easily addressed, I think. But I also agree with Bill that even as it's currently zoned, I think it would be worse off for that neighborhood to develop multiple houses versus controlling what actually can happen there. So those are my thoughts.
Which those are true statements, and I think that whenever we look at the flooding aspect of it, and we don't have the site plans because we haven't actually seen the building or anything like that, and those will be addressed by staff. But from different projects throughout the city, whenever you have more of a water that's parking lot impervious surfaces, they are required to have a way to retain that water on the property, and it's a requirement, and that would be addressed at the time of the building. Whenever we're looking at the zoning aspect, and I was reading through the recommendations, that staff recommends that that 901 South Cherry not be approved for the R3, which is the high density. Staff recommends commission approval to rezone the R2 to medium-density residential and retain, and the key words is retain, the housing overlay for future development if the project envisioned does not proceed. So there's no guarantee that this project is even going to move forward. What we're looking at is the potential of actually having the housing that's necessary. And we're talking student and non-students there. We don't know what that vision of the future actually even looks like. But whenever you're looking at the individuals who are looking for housing, no matter where you're at in Ottawa, it's a hard thing to do, to find housing. I was looking at the area and looking at the map, and in comparison where the college is, and my daughters did not go to Ottawa University. I've not been to Ottawa University, but I know that they were in housing at their college, and they didn't have a vehicle their first year. They had to walk to school, and it was like a half a mile. They didn't have a bus system to be able to get them there to hop on a bus to go to college. They had to get by foot to where they were going to school. And I understand that the concern is that the university has property, but the university's not building this. This is an individual who's looking at not just the students, but then also outside of the students. And I feel that this actually is a really great opportunity. I know it's not going to be something that the neighborhood is used to, but as we're hearing, if we were to take and leave it at the current zoning, the housing that comes in, you're going to have the same traffic, you're going to have the same speeding, you're going to have the same everything, but they're not going to be required to put in sidewalks, and they're not going to be required to put in the water retention, and they're not going to be required whatever other restrictions may or may not be put on them if it were to be approved at a medium density. I've given a lot of thought, and I'm looking at this as a holistic. It's not just the neighborhood, we're looking at the growth of the community. My 5-sentence, 2 cents.
I guess my thought, because, I think we all share a lot of the concerns you have. But we're not charged with that. We're charged with looking at what the whole community needs and taking into account what people who live around it need, taking their concerns into account and trying to address them as best that we can as a governing body. My thoughts after listening to the comments and after listening to staff report, and knowing what the housing situation is for university students and for just the person who drives every day to work somewhere, we need to continue to move forward on housing. And so I'm kind of leaning toward agreeing with the staff, no R3, going to R2 with the only way student housing of over duplexes or triplexes could be put in there would be to come back to us with a conditional use application. That conditional use application will give us even more authority to add restrictions than, say, if we zoned it as R3. Because R3, it's pretty cut and dried what you can do in R3. When you ask for a conditional use permit in R2, there's a lot more questions that you would have to ask. They would still have to have a traffic study. They would still have to have a stormwater study. And what's that nice word that I keep asking you all the time, what the definition of that is? Where no more could come in.
No net rise?
Net rise. There's a thing called net rise that Bill has to school me on about every time. No more water can go off of the property than what is on it as it sits now, and it can't affect the people upstream, or it can't affect the people downstream. It can't constrict the flow so the people upstream flood more. It can't put more water on the downstream, and that's part of the stormwater retention study that we'd have to do for anything that was to go in there under R2 or R3, R2 conditional use or R3. So those concerns don't affect me as much as they do the people who live in the neighborhood. Not saying I don't take them into consideration, but they don't affect me as much. Because I know that somebody could come in there and develop that project as an R1 rental project, and because we have the housing opportunity overlay, they could build 3 and 4 bedroom houses and then put 3-bedroom duplexes in there, you might end up with more beds and more cars than what you would if we had an R2 and had a conditional use permit where, again, where we could oversight it. And I do see a couple of you shaking your head, but I'm telling you that is an absolute fact. And when you have rentals that have more than 2 bedrooms, the chances are probably 80% that you're going to have cars parking on the street. We can't force them to put enough parking in to cover all of the bedrooms and all the cars that could possibly be put in there in R1. Our current regulations just don't allow us to have any discussion on that. We're facing it on a couple of other projects that we have right now. So I guess that's a long way around saying I do not favor R3 at all. But I could see us going to R2 if the developer wants to continue in that direction. Then he can bring us a conditional use permit application with his plans at that time. That's another set of notification to you all. Another chance for you to come to a public hearing and express your concerns, and you'll at least at that point know what it is that you're opposing or what you want. This is just sort of a nebulous, just sort of an out there thing. We're just supposing what will happen now. We won't know until we change the zoning and we have a project come for us. And so that's sort of where I am. I guess I'm sort of in the middle. I'm sort of in the middle. I think R1 could create more problems than what the public thinks, and I think R3 is overreach. And so I'm tending to go to R2 with a conditional use possibility and leave the housing opportunity overlay district in place at this time. Now, anybody else?
Yeah, I want to reiterate something because I saw some shaking heads too about the stormwater. Let me explain a little bit different to you. If the developer decided to build duplexes in their single-family houses, all of the stormwater that they are creating is going to affect all of the ground around this property. If the developer brought in a conditional use permit, this ground, a flood study would have to be done on this ground, and engineers would have to show that this stormwater is not leaving the property and not affecting the surrounding properties. So the stormwater would definitely be a better scenario if the project went forward. I just want to make sure you guys understand that.
If a project goes forward, we don't know what project it'll be yet, but if a project were to go forward.
Yeah, and one other comment, someone said something about they were going to go down to the south end and fill with whatever tons and tons of dirt. They can't do that. They cannot. Because part of this ground is in the floodplain, they cannot add more ground to this dirt. They cannot add more dirt to this ground and get it out of the floodplain. They cannot do that. That's it for me.
Okay. Anybody else? We're at that time in the meeting. Now, there was one typo, but I don't think it's in the findings. I think you have in there that it's not in the floodplain, when in fact, part of the described property is in the floodplain.
Correct.
Right? It's in the
Correct.
100-year floodplain.
The rear,
The south portion.
the southwest side.
Yeah.
Or southeast, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that's that finding, or I don't know whether it's a finding or whether it's a.
It just says floodplain, no.
Where the proposed,
Yeah, but-
where the
but-
proposed is out of, but the other is,
Yeah.
the other part of the property is not.
Where he is
I'll
talking
research
about
that a
is
little
not,
more
but
and
there is a
amend it.
part of the described property that is in the
Okay,
floodplain.
thank you.
Yes.
I'll amend that, thank you.
So with that, what do you want to do?
Well, I agree with your comment. I think and I agree with the staff's comment, if we keep it, with the R2, we have some control with any of the future development. I agree with that. That's where I lean.
And it is going to be a challenge because when somebody brings us a project, the city, it goes through a city review process, by the way. I know some of you may be familiar with what happens, some of you may not. When somebody brings a project into us, it goes to the city and the police chief looks at it, the fire chief looks at it, all the public safety, utility department look at it, and they have to sign off on that project along with everybody else. They're gonna have concerns about sidewalks. They're gonna have concerns about increased pedestrian traffic in the street. They're gonna have concerns about flooding at the south end, and is there some money out there, some grant money or something that can be used to fix that? I know it's not been fixed in the past. I certainly don't speak for anybody, but this is gonna bring it to the attention that we do need housing and maybe something needs to be done there to alleviate some of your other concerns. I know, I was gonna ask Melanie, would you just pass along to Chief Weingartner about the controlled intersection at 10th and Burroughs? Could you?
I've already made a note.
I figured you had, but just in case you hadn't, we want to see if there's something they can do about that. So,
Yes, certainly.
so I think I'm right there. I mean, I know it would be disappointing to you all, but give us a little faith that we're not gonna forget your concerns, and if and when a project does come back, and if and when we're still on this panel, we're gonna look at it and take your concerns into our thought process, because let me tell you, every one of them was a valid concern. We're not dismissing anything you said. I think in that area, everything you said is valid, and some of it is most of it's gonna need to be addressed in order to have any type of development in that area on that property. Would you agree?
No, I agree.
Anything above regular housing.
Anything above regular housing,
Regular housing, they can do
they just
anything.
do it, yeah.
I
So-
think rezoning this in R2 with the overlay is an improvement on that property to allow better control of flooding and
So
all
do we
the
want
other
a
concerns.
recommendation?
What's that?
Do we want a recommendation, or are we at that point?
What we
No?
would need, we will need two motions. We need a motion to accept the staff finding as our own, unless we want to modify them. And then we'd need a motion from this body to the city commission that we recommend they approve in whatever zoning classification we would like them to approve. So we need two separate motions.
Well, I will motion that we accept the staff findings that staff is recommending not to approve the rezone of a R3, high-density residential, but that they do recommend the approval of the R2, medium-density residential at 901 South Cherry, and retain the housing opportunity overlay for future development if the project as envisioned does not go through. I say we just accept it as is.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
Is there any discussion?
Do we need to include the issue about the portion of that is in the floodplain?
Not for a rezone.
Perfect.
We don't. That'll be covered should somebody bring us a project.
Okay.
Would you call the roll, please?
Member Elmer?
Yes.
Member Maines? Member Crowley?
Yes.
Chair Lantis?
Yes.
Member Kane?
Yes.
Member Staresnik Dean?
Yes.
Vice Chair, and Vice Chair when you get abstains.
He recused himself.
Recused himself.
He recused himself. All right, moving on, do we have a motion to the city commission?
So it says to approve or deny, so do we have to make a recommendation?
Well,
to-
this is a typo. What we would do would be, we're making a motion to
Send this forward to the city.
send forward to the city with our recommendation is what we're doing, so. yeah.
It just says to rezone. It doesn't say to R2 or R3.
Well, we'll add that to our motion.
Yeah. I would make the motion to send this to the city to approve to rezone to R2.
Housing opportunity overlay still in place.
Correct.
With the housing opportunity overlay still in place. Is there a second to that
I'll
motion?
second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion?
No.
Hearing none, would you call the roll, please?
Member Elmer?
Yes.
Member Maines? Member Crowley?
Yes.
Chair Lantis?
Yes.
Member Kane?
Yes.
Member Staresnik Dean?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Winnicke has recused himself.
Yes, okay, thank you. So that motion is passed. Now, for all of you out there, you will, at some point in the future, it'll be brought before our study session, should somebody decide to develop that, either a proposal to develop it as an R2 district or a proposal to develop it with a conditional use permit. We'll have a study session on that. We'll have another public hearing on that. And I believe the regulations on that would call everybody within 200 feet of the property should get written notice of that. But it'll also, it's published in what, is there a local legal publication anymore?
Yes,
With the
there
Ottawa
is.
Herald at one day? Is
There
it
is,
still the?
yes.
Okay, so before anything happens over there, the same group of people that are in here tonight are going to get notice that now somebody's brought a project forward. So at that time, you'll be able to come in and hear what we hear, and you'll have the opportunity to support it or oppose it. The zoning,
Your recommendation?
probably the next meeting,
Next meeting?
either the next meeting or the meeting after, depending on what the schedule is.
She's looking.
This will probably go to the April 24th study session, and then it would be considered on the May 3rd regular commission meeting agenda.
And are we allowed to go to the study session?
You can certainly attend.
They don't have,
But there's
they
no
do not
public
have public
comments,
comments, but you can attend, yes.
But they would be able to do public comments during the May 3rd one, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Vice Chair Wadika, would you like to return to the? Okay, we have one more. Yeah, we have one more. It's under new business, and it's a request for consideration of approval of a minor plat of Northeast Ottawa Industrial Park, 4th edition, Big Bear Enterprises, and Jenna will do that one.
Okay, Northeast Ottawa Industrial Park. This is a fairly straightforward project here. Minor replat, Northeast
Microphone.
Industrial. I'm sorry. My little voice.
Thank you.
I'll scoot up. There we go. And we do have David from, he was the applicant on this project. He's on Zoom with us, if we have any questions for him. This minor plat in Northeast Ottawa Industrial Park, they own this lot. They own Lot 10, which is the southern part of this. They've recently purchased Lot 3, which is the northern piece of this, and they're wishing to combine the two. So that it has no public improvements, and it's just a redrawing of the line, so this qualifies as a minor plat and didn't require public hearing. There are no, when it passed Public Works, they have no issues with it, and there's nothing, no problems with utilities. It's just a simple redrawing of the lines. So, my recommendation is that we approve it and move it forward to city for commission, for review and approval.
Thank you. You have any questions for the applicant? Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I do have a question. What's the if all he's trying to do is combine the two lots, why does it need to be replatted?
Instead of vacating the, right?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
understand why it has to go through this process. If all he's doing is trying to combine the two lots, I'm really confused there.
David, do you have an answer for?
David Hamby with BG Consultants representing the applicant. So the applicant has filed a site plan to expand his building. And so it would sit where the existing property line is now. And so the point is, rather than having a building that sits across the property line, to combine it. So the applicant actually bought that north lot from the city of Ottawa. Is that cleared up?
Was there an easement along this property line?
If they build over two properties, if there's a building over that crosses property lines, they have to replat.
So replat and not apply to vacate the, oh, they have to replat.
I
So where in the
personally
ordinance?
disagree with that. If there's no easement there, I mean,
Yeah.
I understand if there's an easement there, then maybe an easement would have to be vacated and replatted. But if he owns both lots and all you're doing is building over the property line of two lots he owns, I'm not sure
Well-
why this would have to go. I mean, he's obviously already gone through the process, but I'm not sure I'm not sure why this was
requested
needed.
that, it's something to, it has to do with the building.
Okay.
It's not necessarily something that we have in our zoning regulations, but when it comes up with the building regulations. So if they were to build if they cross the line,
Okay.
there's some fire, there would have to be 3-hour firewalls and all kinds of things that, it's a building inspection thing, building codes, that they would have to do more work to be able to build this building up to code.
Remember when we
I
were-
disagree with that too. If you're talking about separate ownership, yes. But if it's the same ownership, if
I
he
think
owns
it's
both
the
lots.
potential that the separate lots could be sold
Exactly.
individually in the future. It's just for a future,
It's
kind of a
cleaning
cover
up the
our butts sort of
lot.
thing.
It's cleaning up the lot,
Yeah.
because envision this. Whenever I worked for the city of Kansas City, Missouri, we had a individual who had a house, and he had a garage on 2 separate lots. The house burned. The house was sitting on a lot that didn't belong to the house, but yet it was part of this whole everything. He built a house back. He sold the house. Actually, the property went back to the bank. And the garage, half of it was on one of his parcels that he owned. Half of it was on the parcel that the house was located. But whenever the bank sold it, they sold it as 2 separate lots. You had a new owner who owned this and half of his garage.
No,
And so,
I totally understand your point.
Which is
that
what's
goes back
happening.
to title work. I just think, this is just, and I'm just gonna be completely honest, these are the things that I think frustrate people when they come to Ottawa to try and do things, because this truly was not needed. If the developer owns both lots and there's no easement, we've done this, we did this actually 500 foot north of this property for Select Steel.
Yes.
We had to go through this process because there was an easement through there.
Right.
We had to vacate the easement. But if there's no easement here and he owns both lots, he can do whatever he wants inside what he owns. And as far as what you're saying, I understand what you're saying.
There's
But
no
that goes back
guarantee in
to
the
title. As long as the title follows the legal descriptions and vice versa, there's never a problem. These are the kinds of things that people get frustrated with.
I understand that.
it-
Well, I'm just thinking that half the older houses in the city are spread out over multiple lots.
Yes,
Sure, they are.
Exactly.
Half city
And,
lots,
yeah, my house is on 3 full lots and 3 partial lots. so-
sure. And I think that it's just a way to clean up the deeds so that there's not that problem in the future.
No, I agree with
And-
that, but
and
we shouldn't
we're-
make the developer go and spend a bunch of money to do this when he didn't need to do
when it's
this.
not in the regulations.
Where's the requirement? Do you
It's
know?
in the building code.
Sure, but in the building code,
I'll
where?
have to find it for you.
Right. So we're just discussing tonight, we're not voting on it or anything like that?
If
we
you would like,
actually
it's here for you to vote on, but we
Okay.
can, if you like, we can move
No,
on.
I don't want to push it any further.
But I think we need to have.
I'm just making the comment
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
A
I
bigger
think we need to have a
conversation
study
about
because-
that. Okay.
Because there should be no requirement, if the building is an addition to a building,
Mm-hmm.
there should be no requirement that you've got to put a 3-hour firewall between the 2 buildings, unless it's something to do with ISC codes, or unless it's something to do with.
That's what it is.
It's the International Building
Yeah.
Code, it's the
Well, no.
IBC.
but it has
No, it's
nothing to
not.
do with the
I
property.
I don't
It doesn't
know.
have
I don't-
anything to do with, it's not.
has
it's
nothing
not
to do
a
with the
planning-
Honestly, I don't
property
know.
It's not
I
a
don't
planning and
know.
zoning thing. I have heard from people in the DRC Development Review Committee that this is an issue for building. I've heard this multiple times. So, and then this is an attempt for in the future for us to have cleaner lines and our plats be what they are. And so when this building, if it were to be sold in the future, they would be able to sell it as an entire piece. It couldn't be portioned off and without somebody coming in and getting it, getting it split or rezoned or replatted. So
And it's not just
it
Ottawa,
would never
though,
be
is
able
the
to
whole
be
thing.
resold, though.
No.
If the building goes across both lots and that's what the deed
If the
is,
building's
he would
built
never
across
be
a
able to
lot.
sell the single lot.
I understand what you're saying. I do.
Yeah.
I understand both sides of it, so.
Mhm.
I'm
Chair
fine.
Lantis, we were happy to go back and do the additional research, and we will bring
Absolutely.
you both sides of it. In this conversation, they have the opportunity to either build under the building code requirements and include the fire rated walls that are required under building code, or they can replat as a minor plat and come through this process. And we offer that opportunity to everyone who has the same situation. And so they can choose one or the other in which direction they want to go. So they've chosen to bring this to you, but we will go back and we will gather all the information, bring it back to you at the study session. For the purpose of this item, if you would make a concession and consider it at the study session, although I know that's out of the character of what a study session is for, they are in process of moving ahead with those building plans and trying to get that expansion started, and would want to see this continue down the path a little more quickly than waiting another month, which is why we brought it to you on the regular meeting this
And I'm not saying I'm not for the project. I'm just saying that I don't think this needed to happen.
I think this is something we need to look at, because even if it's not in our jurisdiction, we need to make a recommendation to somebody that it change, because they're all over this community. There are currently buildings sitting on multiple lots, multiple 25-foot lots. And if somebody puts a garage behind them, then they're gonna be sitting on multiple 25-foot lots. And are we gonna require them to put a 3-hour firewall halfway through their garage? I don't think we ever have. So we need to have some consistency, and that's something, if we can't do something about, then we need to at least have some input with those who can.
Certainly.
So I think so, all right, so back to the drawing board. We have a proposal in front of us for a minor replat.
I make a motion to accept the staff's findings.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All call the roll, please. You can do the next one. I'll make sure you would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Chair Lantis.
Yes.
Member Elmer.
Yes.
Member Kane.
Yes.
Member Starisnik Dean.
Yes.
Vice Chair Winika.
Yes.
And Member Crowley.
Yes.
And now we need a motion to approve it, because this doesn't have to go to the
So
city
moved.
commission. Okay. It's your turn.
Second.
You're in the box, Miss Commissioner Cade.
Oh, hey, I'm just noticing that in the.
It does say
agenda,
901 South Cherry.
It says, yeah, it's got the wrong address.
I'm
It's
sorry.
there.
That's my fault.
Yeah.
For the rezone of,
No. So your motion
1015
is
East
10,
Enterprise
15,
Street.
yeah.
as amended.
Otherwise, the person on 901 chair is gonna go.
We have
The
a motion
heck,
and
you
a
know?
second.
Didn't we just do this for something different?
So I just want to make sure we're clear here. So the motion is to approve
Yes.
The
the
request.
consideration of approval for a minor plat of the Northeast Ottawa Industrial Park, 4th Edition, Big Bear Enterprises.
Yes,
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Lantis.
yes.
Member Elmer.
Yes.
Member Kane.
Yep.
Member Starisnik Dean.
Yes.
Vice Chair Winika.
Yes.
And Member Crowley.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, announcements. The next regularly scheduled Planning Commission study session meeting will be Thursday, April 27th, 2023 at noon. And the next regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting will be Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 at 7 p.m. And City Manager Silcott, if you choose to attend those, we will promise to do a better job of decorum on our next meeting. So, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
And
No,
second?
no. Member Kane moved.
Okay. And Member Crowley seconded. And now all in